Welcome to another masterclass here at A Mind for All Seasons. And today we're going to talk about something a little bit different than brain science, but something that affects us in terms of our cognitive and mental health. Our topic today is goal management versus time management. And I think this becomes really important because we all have a tendency, especially in today's busy workaday world, to feel kind of overwhelmed. And when we're feeling overwhelmed, whether we're working as professionals or we're retired, but still trying to get lots of things done, that can elevate our stress, and elevated stress affects the brain and the entire body. So, learning how to navigate the busyness of the world today, I think, is especially important. Now, I certainly don't have all the answers, but I want to share with you today some key things that I've learned over the years that are helpful, and I've applied them in my own life. I've also coached many people through applying these principles. So, the first thing that we have to acknowledge is that whether we have a desk that looks like this, or this is kind of analogous to what our brains might look like, we have a lot of stuff going on, and it can feel overwhelming. Maybe you've had that experience where you sit down and maybe your desk doesn't look exactly like this, but maybe you sit down to start working through something. And as you're sorting through, finding the next thing that you need for the project, you find a paper that you forgot to fill out. And so you think, well, I better get that done. And in the process of that, you've got to look up some information. So you pull up your computer and you look on your email to find the information that you need for that paper. And then you notice three emails that are kind of like fires that you have to put out. So you start putting out those fires, and then you see where this is going. Things kind of unravel, and before long, a few hours have gone by, and you feel like you haven't done everything that you need to do. You've kind of flitted around and touched on a few things, but I think that's a common experience that a lot of us run into. Now, we can even laugh about it, and sometimes there are things in our culture that poke fun at this. So here's a quick little clip just for fun.
Bill Seidman from Buffalo.
Thank you.
Aero Medical Supplies in West Seneca.
Thanks.
And Angela's still waiting for you to approve the new
Okay,
billing rates.
Aaron, you know what? If you're gonna keep coming in here with work that I need to do, I'm gonna need a new monitor. It's not working.
Hey, Michael.
Yes.
Do you want the Buffalo clients under new accounts or existing? I've been doing some of both.
Everybody wants a piece of me.
So, Michael, how are you handling the Buffalo transition on your end?
Great on my end. How about your end?
Well, I think we're on the same end, Michael.
Then why did you say your end?
Let me be more specific. How are you personally handling the increase in responsibility?
Well, I will tell you, David, I'm either doing the work or I'm not.
So are you doing the work?
Read it and weep.
Michael, if you need us to help you with anything, you just let me know, okay?
I'm good. I have got a lot of balls in the air. If I wanted to be in the business of giving people bad news, I would have become a coroner or an anchorman.
All right, so I think we can laugh about things like that, and certainly culturally we make fun of issues like the fact that sometimes we can confuse busyness with productivity. More on that to come. But with so much that we have to deal with in life, so many things coming on our plates, again, whether we're in the workplace or not, there's a lot that's begging for our attention. How do we get it all done? How do we separate signal from noise? How do we know what's most important to be focusing on and navigate the increasing overwhelm that so many of us face in the world today? Well, I don't think that it's about reading more books. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that there isn't value in some of these books. But the sheer number of books that are written about how to get stuff done and how to be more productive and how to be more organized and how to use our time better can be absolutely overwhelming in and of itself. And sometimes we can spend our time reading that stuff, trying to figure it out. And yet at the end of the day, we're no closer to actually accomplishing more and feeling like we have some sense of control over our day. So what could we do? I think the first thing that we need to understand is that the idea itself of time management is a myth. You can't manage time. I don't think that's possible. I think everything that we need to know about time is actually something that was summed up by my mother when I was a teenager and I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed because of some decisions that I had made. I chose to take some advanced placement classes while at the same time choosing to be involved in multiple different bands as a saxophone player. At one point in high school, I was playing in 7 different groups between community groups and a little jazz band and a wind symphony that I was part of, etc. So I was busy with all that stuff. I was doing a paper route early in the morning. I was teaching piano lessons in the afternoon. And I felt overwhelmed and stressed. And I sat down and I talked to my mom and I said, Mom, how do I manage my time better? How do I get all this stuff done? And she said, Well, Eric, for starters, you need to understand that you can't manage time. And the only thing that you can really understand about time is that we all have 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, and you have to choose how to use that time. And nobody's holding a gun to your head, but you've made some choices here. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to continue doing those things, or are you going to use your time in different ways? And that was sort of the beginning of understanding some principles that I think are helpful. It's not about time management principles, though, because we can't manage time. Time keeps ticking. So, what is it that we can actually manage? I think it's more about managing our goals, managing our priorities. It's about how we use the time and what we will prioritize. What does actually rise to the level of something that should get our attention versus all the things that we will discard. So, the antidote is not figuring out how to do more. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. That's why there are so many books. Oh, I'm going to teach you how to get twice as much stuff done in the day. What if that's not the answer? What if the answer is learning how to do more of the right things? Now, sometimes people define their 100% like this. And again, we can laugh a little bit about some of these things, but um, I think that when it comes to getting more done, we need to recognize that some things have a much bigger impact than other things. About 20% of the things that we do give us 80% of our outcomes. So if we can figure out what that 20% is and really focus there and spend more of our time on the 20%, then we're going to get a lot more outcomes. And if instead we spend our time spinning our wheels on low value items, it's not going to feel like we're making real progress in life. I love how Steve Jobs put it when he explained that focus is not about saying yes. It's actually about saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are. So he points out you've got to be able to pick really carefully. You have to say no to 1,000 things. So again, this is the concept of how do we separate signal from noise? And heaven knows there's a whole lot of noise in the world today. So one of the first things that we might consider in our own lives is, are we addicted to being busy? I have fallen into this trap before. There was a time when I was running a busy memory care community that my phone would ring a lot, either with a call or I'd get a text alert. Somebody needed me. Somebody had a question. And I didn't have the wisdom for a long time to recognize that I was getting addicted to being busy. I actually felt important when the phone rang. Oh, somebody needs me. And if the phone didn't ring, I started to feel this little nudge of what's going on? Does anybody need me? Am I important here? And I think that was very misguided. But I think it's easy for us to slip into the addiction of being busy. We like to trumpet it and say, hey, look at all the stuff that I'm doing. Or people say, how are you? Oh, I'm just so busy. Do we say that because it means we're important and it means that all these people want a little piece of us? Is there a part of us that thinks that that's actually a good thing, even if we're not admitting that on the surface? I think it's possible, and it's something that we might need to consider. And yet, as I mentioned earlier, being busy is not the measure of success. Busyness is actually the enemy of productivity. I love this cartoon. I've loved it for a long time, that you can be really busy. You can work very hard, or you can be productive. And that doesn't mean that you aren't working hard if you're productive, but it means your focus is different. Treading water and swimming take roughly the same amount of energy, but one will move you toward a destination and the other just has you working really hard. So if we can understand what constitutes productivity versus busyness, I think we'll make some gains. When we are feeling really busy and lots of stuff are yanking at us for their attention, instead of getting addicted to that, I think we need to recognize busyness for what it is. It's chronically elevated cortisol and adrenaline and dopamine. And you add to that some of the consequences of all that busyness, which might be frequent headaches, or maybe we're having a hard time sleeping because there's just so much stuff rattling around. Maybe we have neck pain or back pain or heart disease or depression or memory impairment. And we get caught up into thinking, oh, I can manage all this stuff. I can multitask. I can start this thing and then get pulled over here for a minute and then come back this way. And that's not how things work. That makes our brains kind of like the picture of Homer Simpson here on the right. When we try to multitask, it actually lowers our IQ by 10 points. And that's about like losing a full night of sleep, which is twice as bad as smoking pot. And if you think about it and you go look at the research, not only would it be really bad to just constantly be in a state that's equivalent to losing a full night's sleep, but what the research shows is that the average desk job employee loses 2.1 hours every day and 546 hours a year from distractions. That is staggering. Out of a typical 8-hour workday, we're losing over 2 hours. What would you do with an extra 2 hours in your day? And yet, getting pulled this way or that way is a real problem for many of us. And even if you're not in the workplace, those constant distractions that have us flitting from one thing to the next and not doing really focused, high value work that's truly productive, I think get us into trouble. Research physiologist James Johnston said, when you multitask, it's inevitable that each individual task will be slower and of lower quality. Well, that sounds a whole lot like busyness being the enemy of productivity. That's like dragging the cart in the cartoon with the square wheels instead of just slowing down and focusing and taking time to have some round wheels. So another question that we could ask ourselves is, am I carefully using my weapon of mass distraction? Now, we poke fun at some of these things, but it's actually not funny. You got a picture on the right of a guy walking across a road looking at his phone. And clearly, this is a photoshopped image. But it's actually no laughing matter because a significant number of people die every year from accidents that are caused by staring at their phone instead of paying attention to the world around them. And how many times do we get so caught up in our weapon of mass distraction that we're not paying attention to the people that are around us, that are closest to us? Several years ago, I was traveling through the Salt Lake International Airport, and I had a layover. And so I went and I got some food. And as I was sitting in a restaurant eating, I looked over and I saw a father at a table with a little girl, kind of like the picture of mother and daughter that you see down below on the slide. And he was sitting there on his phone, and I just kind of kept glancing up and I watched him. And I went through my entire meal without him looking at his daughter. And she was young enough, she didn't have a phone or anything. She was just looking around, kind of people watching, eating her food. Dad didn't give her the time of day. Now, I don't want to judge him unfairly. Maybe something critical was going on. Maybe he had some crisis that he was dealing with that he was trying to coordinate. Who knows? But maybe not. Maybe he was just distracted by that weapon of mass distraction. Cal Newport wrote a book in 2016 titled Deep Work. And if you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's a great read. But he points out that the ability to perform really deep work, where you're truly focused, where you're not distracted by other things, is becoming increasingly rare at exactly the same time that it's becoming increasingly valuable. And as a consequence, the few people who are willing to cultivate the skill of going deep and really being focused and truly thinking are going to thrive. I think that is especially true as artificial intelligence becomes more and more popular in the world today. A lot of people are starting to rely on AI to sort of fill in the gaps of their thinking so that they don't do real deep work and do the thinking that they need to themselves. They're outsourcing some of their brain power. I think there's a danger to that. I'm all for leveraging technology in helpful ways, but consider what has happened with phone numbers. Now, I don't know if there's anything amazing that happens when you can remember phone numbers. But I think we've all lived through the opportunity of, or the time when we've seen what happens when you have a device that will remember phone numbers for you and you just hit a button to auto dial someone. I don't know the phone numbers of a couple of my children because they have newer phones and I never learned them. My device remembers them, and I just say, call so and so, and the phone dials. I know my phone numbers when I was a child, when we had a landline, and I just had to pick up a phone and dial it. But by outsourcing something to a device, we lose some things cognitively. Now, maybe it's okay to let the phone remember phone numbers so that we can focus on other things. But if we're not really doing deep, distraction-free work where we're taking time to think, then I think we're missing something. And it might be something really important for ourselves, for the impact that we're trying to make in the lives of people around us, and ultimately for our world. If you look back historically, you find the greatest thinkers of all time had one trait in common, at least one, and that's that they would carve out time to just go walk in the woods and think. Or people like Thoreau that went off to Walden Pond and would just reflect for a long period of time. That's something that I think we could stand to have more of so that we can learn how to better separate signal from noise, and we can stay focused on what still only we can do. We can't outsource some of that deep, deep thinking. All right, so now I'm having a trouble with my slides. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong. Let's try this again. Oh, technical difficulties. Hang on. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, let's try this again with some better luck. There we go. Okay, so let's put some tools in our toolbox. We're trying to talk about separating signal from noise. How do we focus on priorities instead of distractions? Well, for starters, yes, set goals. But let's understand the limitations of setting goals. It's a good thing to have a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, but they can be absolutely overwhelming. When Ernest Hemingway was asked, how do you write a great novel? He famously said, well, first you clean out the refrigerator. And what he was talking about is just a natural human tendency. When you look at a really big goal, something that feels daunting, it's overwhelming. And so our natural human tendency is to try to get an easy win. And so these days, if your goal is to write a book, maybe you don't clean out the refrigerator. It's probably a lot more common that you say, well, I'll just get through some emails first. I got to get something done. I have to have a victory. And that's exactly why we don't accomplish more big goals in our lives, because emails are really low value for the most part. There are very few emails that actually constitute a fire that needs to be put out immediately. Brendan Burchard once said the email inbox is a very convenient tool for organizing other people's priorities. So what do we do instead? How do we not fall prey to this natural human tendency to look at the big goal and get overwhelmed? Set the big goal, but plan the steps to get there. Plan easy, simple, direct steps. So if your goal is to write a book, then you might just break it down and you say something like, okay, I want to write a book in the next 12 months. Well, how long do I want the book to be? If you figure out the page count that you're aiming for, then you can do the simple math and figure out, all right, I want to write 5 days a week. Okay, great. How many pages do I need to write each day? And how many paragraphs does that translate into? And how long does it take me to write those paragraphs? And then that tells me how much time I need to carve out. And if we make that our highest priority, if truly getting the book done is the most important thing that we could do, then maybe that's the thing that we should do first. And it feels very different if what you have to do is write 2 paragraphs a day. It feels totally different to wake up and say, okay, I got to go write my 2 paragraphs. That is completely different than saying, I need to write a novel. Hopefully, you can see how planning the steps to get there will actually move the needle. So set the big goal, plan the steps, and then forget about the big goal. Don't talk about that goal in your own mind. Focus on just taking one step at a time. And if you keep doing that consistently, you're going to get there. Consider opportunity cost. This is another really important principle. Opportunity cost, coming from the world of finance and economics, is the benefit that could have been gained from an alternative use of the same resource. Well, our most valuable resource is our time. So consider, let's say that you're working. You probably have an hourly rate, or you have an hourly rate that you aspire to. So let's just say that your hourly rate is $100 an hour. Not terrible. You can definitely live on $100 an hour. So let's suppose that's your hourly rate. And let's say that your fence blows over. Well, you've got to get a new fence. What if you know how to repair the fence? You could repair the fence, but what if it would cost $50 an hour to pay someone else to repair the fence, and your hourly rate is $100 an hour? If you're considering opportunity cost, then you're actually money ahead to do your work and keep earning $100 an hour and use 50 of those dollars to pay someone else to fix the fence. Now, if you happen to love working with your hands and it's just a really good stress release for you to get out there and fix the fence, then that's a different matter. Maybe you choose to fix the fence. And the same could be true of all sorts of different things that we can do in our lives. In the workplace, there might be work that you're fully capable of doing, but it might need to be done by someone else because it's not the most impactful thing that you can do. And someone else could have an opportunity to grow if they're doing that. And sometimes we take way too much on because we're not considering opportunity costs and we're not really leveraging our most valuable asset correctly, which is our time. One of the ways that we can better manage our goals and be more focused is to learn to be more intentional. And some of you have heard me talk about this before. This is something I learned from Brendan Burchard. But he points out that when we go through transitions in the day, we need to do a couple of things. We need to release tension and set intention. Well, here's what that looks like for me if you haven't heard this already. If you're going from one thing to the next, one activity to the next activity, like me before I started this webinar, that was a transition point. I went from meeting with a client to then working on a project, to then shifting gears and needing to do this presentation. So beforehand, I took some moments to just take deep breaths and to exhale and to imagine that all of my thoughts, concerns, everything that I'd been working on the day was just written in the sand. And when I took a deep breath in, it was like the tide was coming up and I held it and then just exhaled. And I imagined that the tide was going out and washing everything off the sand. So I was clearing my mind. Kind of like you clear the calculator. If you're doing a bunch of mathematical calculations on a calculator, you know that after you complete a certain number of calculations, you've got to hit the clear button so that you can perform a new series of calculations. Otherwise, your math's going to be all wrong. So you clear the calculator, and then you set your intention. And for me, what that looks like is I just ask myself, if I was to be really effective in this moment, if I was to be really focused, if I was to make an impact in others' lives in this moment, what would it look like? What would it sound like? What would I feel like internally? Now, I'm not perfect at doing this at every transition point in the day, but I think about it often enough that it really helps me. I do this when I get home, for example. I take a moment in the car to just exhale a little bit, clear my mind, get the clutter out, and then ask myself if I was to be the best husband to my wife possible, if I was to be the best father to my children possible, how would I show up? What would it look like? What would it sound like? What things would be most important as I interact? And then I try hard to go do that. And I'm not perfect at that. None of us are. But if we're intentional and we're operating by design instead of by default, we're going to get further. And by doing that, the days and the times that I focus on that, I accomplish more. And I'm better able to separate signal from noise, what truly matters versus what is a distraction. One of the things that we can leverage is something that I learned from studying the piano. I started taking piano lessons when I was 7 years old. And I actually studied piano all through college. And I still play. And I've taught music history classes for 25 years. It's just kind of an avocation. So music's an important part of my life. And I wish I knew when I was 7 and up through high school what I finally learned when I was in college and studying with an amazing piano professor, Dr. Susan Duhlmeyer. I didn't realize that I was practicing all wrong. What I was doing wrong is that I would sit down with a composition and I'd kind of play through it to get the lay of the land. And then I would go over and over and just kind of repeat until I could play it. And I was not really intentional in the effort. I was just playing through it until I got better at it. But invariably, there would be a few measures in the composition where things were a little bit harder than everywhere else. And sometimes I would make a mistake. And then I'd go back over and I'd replay it. And then I'd kind of replay it until I didn't make the mistake. And then I'd keep on going. But I wasn't being as thoughtful and intentional as Dr. Duhlmeyer taught me to be. She helped me recognize that, yes, play through it one time first and kind of figure out the lay of the land, figure out where the trouble spots are, and then take some time to work out fingering patterns and even write that in the music and study that out. And then find the real trouble spots and go there and work on those and play them so slowly that I could play it perfectly. And if I couldn't play it through perfectly at that speed, then slow it down further until I could do it exactly right. Otherwise, I was risking learning something wrong. And when you're learning to play something on the piano, you're learning, you're training muscle memory. Well, in every aspect of our lives, we're essentially training a type of muscle memory. We're training reactions. And so many of us are just rushing through and we're not noticing the areas where we're getting stuck. And we find so much enjoyment in the areas where, oh, things flow a little bit easier and they're going really well, that we're not slowing down just a little bit and taking the time to correct the muscle movement and to work on something that's maybe not going so well. Now, I'm a big fan of leveraging strengths and not getting too hung up on weaknesses. But we also, in addition to understanding our own individual superpowers, we really can get more competent in certain areas if we're thoughtful about them, if we make an effort to improve in that area. And often we need to leverage piano practice techniques by slowing down, seeing clearly where we're slightly off track, and working through it and saying, oh, did I get it that time? And if not, instead of continuing to move forward and just rushing through it, no, let's go back, let's try that again. Let's be intentional about it. And if we do that, then we make more progress. I like how Emerson put it when he said, that which we persist in doing becomes easier. Not that the nature of the thing changes, but that our capacity to do it increases. And I believe that as humans, we can genuinely develop greater capacity if we slow things down, notice where we need to do things a little differently, tweak it, and then gradually speed it back up again. We can also leverage the law of pain. Sometimes we have a hard time focusing and actually getting something done because there's not enough pain involved. Motivation increases when the pain of failing to act is greater than the pain of acting. One of my business mentors told me a story years ago about an experience that he had with his wife and her best friend. They were over at the house chatting, and the best friend was so frustrated that she was having a hard time losing some weight. And she knew what she needed to do to lose weight. She knew that she needed to shift her diet and really cut excessive carbohydrates out. She ate a lot of fast food. She knew that that was a problem. And she also was very sedentary. She said, I know I need to change how I eat. I know I need to exercise, but I just can't bring myself to do it. And so this mentor of mine talked to her and said, I can help you. You might not like it, but I promise I can help you. And she said, would you? Because I got a high school reunion coming up in like 9 months, and I want to hit my goal. I want to feel really comfortable going to that reunion, and I don't want to show up this way. This is not the best version of me. So she verbalized some momentum, but what did my mentor do? I thought it was kind of brilliant. It was a little out of the box. He said, what is an organization that you hate? And she thought for a minute and she said, oh, I know just the one. And she called out an organization. And he said, how would you feel if you had to donate $1,000 to that organization? And she said, that is the last thing on earth I would want to do. And he said, great. I want you to get out a check right now. And I want you to write a check for $1,000 to that organization. And I want you to post date it for the date that you intend to weigh X amount, whatever her goal was. And she kind of looked at him sideways and said, okay. And he said, now I want you to give it to your best friend, my wife. And her job is to mail that check to that organization on that date if you have not hit your goal. Are you in? And she said, okay, I trust you. Well, long story short, she more than made her goal. And she later told this mentor of mine, every single time I thought about skipping my workout or going to fast food instead of taking the time to prepare something that would be better for me, every time that came up in my mind, I thought of that organization and I thought, no way are they getting my money. I'm not going to do that. I won't give them that money. And so she stayed on her goal because there was an intentional effort to leverage the law of pain. Now, we can do that in a lot of different ways. So I invite you to think about, hey, could I leverage that law of pain in some way? Instead of just organically letting it pop up, where maybe you don't do anything with your health until you have the heart attack. And then, oh, suddenly you've got a lot of pain and you're highly motivated. Instead of that, could you more intentionally do something kind of like I described? Another principle for focusing on goals instead of trying to manage time is to really focus on keystone habits. You see a picture here of an arch, and the keystone is labeled. Keystone is that central stone in an arch, and it's the one that keeps the arch from collapsing. All of the stones in an arch are important, but an arch will not stand up on its own unless you set the keystone. Now, Charles Duhigg, in his book, The Power of Habit, coined the term keystone habit. And it's habits that hold the others in place. So to give you an example from my own experience, many years ago, like 20 years ago, I was reading a biography of a great man, a man who I really admired. And in that biography, he was asked by the author, what do you think it takes to be successful? And the man said, there's one thing to be really successful, and it's to get up at 6 o'clock and go to bed at 10 o'clock. That's it. Just get up early to be successful. And I thought, okay, I could do better at that. I need to get up early. And I thought, I probably need to get up more like 5:30 to get everything done in the day that I want to get done in the day. And so I had one goal come at the start of the new year. I read that close to the end of the year, and I thought, okay, New Year's, we're going to set new goals for the year. Seemed like a natural transition point. So I had a goal to get up at 5:30. And I absolutely failed that entire year. I had my moments of greatness, but I failed overall. And the next year, same thing. I kept failing. And for a few years, I struggled with that goal. And it was the only goal that I had that year. And then I realized I got the wrong goal. I'm not focused on the keystone habit. The whole reason that I'm not getting up early is that I have a lousy evening routine. I was not doing the things that I needed to have a really good, solid shutdown routine to where I was getting to bed at a consistent time. And once I focused on that habit, that's when getting up early became easy. That's when things naturally transition. So, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, ask yourself, what does this depend on? Is there a keystone habit where maybe instead of focusing on what I think is the goal, I need to actually focus on the real habit that makes that one happen? Sometimes we also need to make a public commitment. Sometimes we need to put out there that we're going to do something. Many of you here in this webinar watch the Caregiver Minute, which is a daily video that I put out every Monday through Friday. And I've done it now for over 4 years. And it just gives one tool, one idea, one strategy, one tip. And it's originally designed for family and professional caregivers, but now a lot of people watch it who just like to hear a tip about brain science or things like that. And I put that off for years. I had that idea long before I started doing it. I don't know why it took me so long to do it, but what moved the needle is I finally just said, I have to make this happen, so I'm going to make a public commitment. And I put it out there. I just announced on social media, I'm going to start doing this. And I thought, okay, now I'm committed. I have to do it. And once you start something like that, you're committed. And so over the last 4 years, there have been times where I was going to be gone for a week and a half. And I thought, oh my goodness, I got to record all those videos before I go. I can't just do it one at a time. And yet I carved out the time and I made it happen because I knew that there was someone on the other end of that watching, waiting, expecting that to happen. And now there's a whole system, there's a process for how we create those, but it all was because of making a public commitment. If you're trying to write a book and you want to be really sure that you get it done, make a public commitment. Maybe publish the first chapter and have a group of readers and say, okay, I'm going to send you the next chapter by the end of next month. Well, that's a public commitment that's going to up the likelihood that you'll actually get it done because now you know you've got 50 people waiting for that. And they're going to be pinging you saying, hey, I haven't seen this yet. Where is it? So that might help you. The next thing that we have to do is avoid the motivation mirage. A lot of people chase motivation. They say, yeah, I'm going to clean out the garage when I feel really motivated. And you know, sometimes I'll get that spark of motivation. Now, that's maybe an extreme case, but in our day-to-day lives, we often are chasing motivation. We're waiting to feel motivated to do something, and we forget the fact that motivate means we're moving. We're actually in motion. We're doing something. The only way that you can feel motivated is to start moving. So instead of waiting until you feel motivated to do something, you have to start motivating, you have to start moving, and then motivation builds. You actually get momentum when you are in motion. So start moving first and foremost. All it takes is one right step in the right direction, a little bit of progress, and the wheels start turning and you start making some progress. Now, this ties into some interesting social science research. We have known for a long time that behavior follows attitude. So if you have a lousy attitude, your behavior is not going to be so good. But it is more consistently true that attitude follows behavior. I think that's really interesting. The way that we behave has a bigger effect on how we feel and what our attitude is than our attitude has on our behavior. So if you want to change your attitude, change your behavior. If you want to be more motivated, you have to change behavior. And then that sense of motivation comes. Part of how we know that is from Paul Ekman and Wallace Friesen. Ekman and Friesen are social science researchers. And a lot of their work was published in the 70s and 80s. And initially, much of their work focused on the facial action coding system. They wanted to come up with a scientific way of understanding human emotions that were common across cultures. And they realized that we express emotion in the face, and that requires muscle movement. And so they figured out all the different types of muscles in the face that have to move and how they had to move to create different sorts of emotions. And they came up with numerical ways of assessing those types of movements or sort of quantifying and tracking those movements. And Ekman and Friesen would sit across each other day after day in what they thought would be about a 6-month project, and it turned into something like 2 years. They would practice making emotions on their face. They actually learned how to consciously manipulate all these different muscles on their face so that they could make emotions. And then they would really study out which muscles were moving, and they would come up with a numerical description of it. So, kind of an interesting project. Well, at one point in the project, they found themselves feeling disgust and contempt for the other person. Really bad human emotions, not pleasant things to be feeling. And they couldn't understand why they were feeling it. They were going home at the end of the workday having contempt for each other, and they had been friends and co-researchers for a while. And eventually, one of them broke the news to the other that, hey, I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but I'm really irritated with you. And the other admitted, I've been feeling the same way. And that's when they realized, wait a minute, we've been studying anger and contempt and disgust. We've been making those faces at each other, trying to figure out what muscles move to make those faces. So they started feeling that the neurotransmitters and the hormones involved in the physiological experience of feeling disgusted were actually released when they were making those faces. So some people talk about a smile being a curved line that sets things straight. I think it's actually true. I think if we choose to smile, even if we aren't feeling joyful and happy, if we do that enough, we actually start to release some of the chemistry that would allow us to feel that way. And we've probably all had the experience of maybe having a really rough morning. We wake up on the wrong side of the bed and things get worse from there. But we show up at work or we show up with other people in our lives and we decide, I don't want to drag my garbage into their life. So I'm going to put on a happy face and I'm going to get to work. And I bet we've all had the experience of getting to the end of the day and actually feeling really good about the day. And that rough morning is the distant past. And I think a lot of that is because we chose to change our behavior. We can't always change how we feel, and we don't have to like it, but we can choose how we behave from moment to moment. That is a conscious decision, and we all have our agency. So I love this remark that I found once in a quote book. It was a remark from a 1930 Methodist Sunday school convention, of all things. And it said, it is easier to act yourself into right thinking than to think yourself into right acting. I think there's something to be said for that. Now, a couple more principles and then we'll have a little discussion. Sometimes when it comes to managing goals, instead of just getting hung up on time, we need to focus on resource allocation. And sometimes we think, oh, I don't have enough resources, but what we really have is an allocation problem. So for example, about 9 years ago, I was asked to consult with a critical access hospital and co-located skilled nursing facility. And when I got there, the skilled nursing facility had just had their survey, and it went pretty well. But one of the things they were dinged on is that they didn't have enough staff in the dining room at lunchtime assisting residents who couldn't feed themselves. Those residents had to wait too long for someone to come around and assist them. And the staff were kind of panicky because this was in a small town and they didn't know how they were going to hire more people. And they said, how are we going to get more people to do this? We have a tight economy as it is. And as we talked through it, we had an interdisciplinary group. We called together people from throughout the organization to just discuss things. And I saw something brilliant happen. The housekeeping supervisor raised her hand and she turned to the facility nurse and she said, what would have to happen for me to be able to assist those residents in the dining room? And the nurse said, well, I'd have to do some training with you. We'd have to document the training and you'd have to make the time to do it. And the housekeeping supervisor said, well, how long would it take you to do the training? And the nurse said, well, not that long, maybe 30 minutes. We'd talk about some things. You'd demonstrate a few things. It wouldn't take that long. And the housekeeping supervisor said, well, how soon can you do the training? And the nurse said, tomorrow? And she said, great. Could you train a group of us? And the nurse said, yeah, why? And she said, look, during lunchtime, we're usually downstairs in the hospital, part of this facility, And we're a critical access hospital. We're in a rural area. Most of the days, we don't have that many people in the hospital. We might have one person in there. It doesn't take us that much time to go around and clean the things that we need to clean. And at lunchtime, when you guys are upstairs struggling, we're finding ourselves just sitting around chit-chatting. And we love these residents. We would absolutely come up and help them at lunchtime. So why don't you just train us how to do it? And that's when they realize we don't need to hire more staff. We have plenty of people. We're just not using our resources very well. So it's often valuable to take a step back and say, do I actually have a resource problem, or am I just not allocating those resources well? Now, when it comes to our most valuable resource, our time, one of the most impactful things that I could share with you is a method that I'm not real proud to say I had to pay $10,000 to learn. I paid $10,000 to go off to a masterclass in Southern California for business executives over the course of a few days. And one of the things that I learned at that retreat is called the box and shelf method. So you're going to get it here today for a whole lot less than $10,000. Suppose you remember the picture I showed you at the beginning of the presentation with a desk that was just totally cluttered with lots of stuff. Imagine that whether that's your desk or your mind or both, that everything that you have to do, all of the projects in your life and all of the to-dos are represented by a piece of paper or several pieces of paper that are just piled up on that desk. The first thing that you can do to use this box and shelf method is get some boxes and get some file folders and literally or figuratively go around and pick up everything that relates to a single project and put it in one folder or one box. And once you've organized all of that stuff and put it in one place, then ask yourself, is this something that I need to do, or does it need to be delegated? And if it's something that you could do in no more than 5 minutes, then just get it done. Get it out of your life, get it off the desk. That's just a to-do. Just check it off. Next, if it takes longer than about 5 minutes, then it's a project. And if you're clear on the fact that it needs to be delegated, then take that file of stuff to the person that you need to delegate it to, give clear instructions, and then this is really key. Get out your calendar, have them get out theirs, and you schedule a time to follow up. Give them instructions about what success looks like so that they know the target they're aiming at, and then say, hey, I want to check in and see how this is going with you. Do you mind if we schedule some time Friday at 3 or maybe 4:30 that we could talk for just a few minutes so that we could make sure that you have the support and the help that you need? Delegating doesn't mean that you aren't still responsible. It means that you're giving someone else an opportunity to participate and you're giving them a chance to grow. And the thing that people forget to do is to schedule that time to follow up. Because otherwise, you're going to just worry about it. Once you put it on the calendar, you don't have to worry about it so much. So delegate everything that you need to delegate, and then look at what's left. If it's a project that you need to do, go through and say, what is the most important of all of these projects? Start with that one. And then ask yourself, how much time do I think that it will take me to do this project? Well, let's say you estimate 10 hours. You better give yourself 13. Add 30% to all of your time estimates, because as humans, we're notoriously bad at estimating time. And then ask yourself, when do you need to complete the project? If it's 13 hours and you want to be done 30 days from now, then you have 30 days to do 13 hours of work. And open your calendar and schedule your priorities instead of using your calendar to just book other people's priorities. And go through and block out 60-minute chunks, 13 of them. Maybe you do 30-minute chunks, but if it's a real project, it's going to take you a little while to get focused and to concentrate and to get into the zone. And then you put the file away or you put the box on the shelf, and you do that with all of the other projects. You schedule the time that you're going to spend on those projects. And then when it comes up on your calendar, that is sacred time. You turn off your phone. You turn off your emails. You turn off all other alerts, and you pull out that project and you work on it head down with a timer for 60 minutes. When the timer goes off, you're done. You fold it up, you put the folder back away, you put the box on the shelf, and you don't even have to think about it again until it comes back up on your calendar. And if you're confident that you've carved out the time to get that project done, as long as you honor that time, or if there's an absolute emergency, you reschedule that block of time, then you're going to get it done. And it's going to be a lot less effort than it has to, than some people make it out to be. Okay, last couple principles. Leverage Parkinson's law. I call it the vacation paradox. We've all had the experience of the day before vacation, we get like 20 times more done than we do on a normal day. Why is that? Well, it's because Parkinson's law says work expands to fill the space given it. It's always kind of a moment of shame for me when I get so much more done before vacation or before some major event. It's always a reminder that if I'm really focused, if I have a good plan, if I know exactly the stuff that I need to check off the list that's really important and absolutely has to get done, I can actually tick through it pretty quickly and get that done. Well, knowing that we're capable of more than we sometimes do should inspire us to do a little bit more consistently. We can also control the bookends. There's a whole lot of stuff that falls apart in the middle of our day, but we can put high priority things in the morning, and we have a lot more control over what happens in the evening. At least most of us do. So we can be thoughtful about how we control the bookends of our day. We can remember that dull knives don't cut very well. And so when we tell ourselves the story, oh, I don't have time to exercise, I don't have time to sleep, I don't have time to do this or that, we can realize that no, rest and recovery are not just luxuries, they're necessities. We have to sharpen the knife. We can boost our energy and enthusiasm through preventive maintenance. And this is the group that we talk to all the time about things like brain training and exercise and diet and dental health and sleep and stress management and supplementing in areas where you're deficient. That's taking care of the system so that you can get optimal results. Don't take better care of your car. Don't take better care of your car than you take care of yourself. Most people take their car in for a regular oil change. Most people don't just drive their car indefinitely until it runs out of oil and the engine seizes up, because we know it's way easier to just change the oil than it is to deal with a ruined engine. Well, don't treat your body worse than your car. Do some preventive maintenance every day. Lastly, understand that researchers feel like about 95% of our behavior is driven by the unconscious mind. That means most of what we're doing is on autopilot. We're not even thinking about it. That means that if we can take some time to intentionally program the unconscious mind, we're going to get further. For most of us, what that looks like is taking intentional time in the morning to think about the few most important things that we need to do, to really meditate on how we want to do them, to think about skills that we're working to develop, to remind ourselves consciously of how we want to show up in our interactions, and then set about it, go about the day and work on it. Now, there's a lot more that could be said about how to program the unconscious mind, but it's a thought that I'll let you sit with a little bit. So in the end, are you a thermometer or are you a thermostat? Thermometers just take the temperature of the room. Thermostats are a set point. We set the temperature. Are you showing up in life intentionally and you're hitting the set point, or are you just taking the temperature of the world around you? Do you get up and check your phone first thing in the morning and let other people's priorities and other people's fires set your set point for the day? Or do you get up and you get your mindset right and take care of yourself and sharpen the saw a little bit and decide how you're going to show up and program your unconscious mind and then get busy with the day? That's using your life more as a thermostat than just taking the temperature of everything around you.